Ever find yourself kind of looking back at a relationship and wondering, how did I end up there? Like, what was I thinking?
Happens to the best of us, right?
Totally. Well, get ready to unpack, because today's deep dive is all about those head-scratching relationship patterns. Specifically, why some people seem to attract disrespectful partners.
Yeah. It's a question a lot of people grapple with. I mean, often with a good deal of self-blame, unfortunately.
For sure.
So hopefully, by unpacking some of these ideas, we can maybe offer a fresh perspective.
I am all for fresh perspectives. Always up for that. Our source material for this one is this, they call it a relationship advice segment.
Okay.
It's called Texiang de Templecan.
Okay.
And they make a pretty bold claim right off the bat. They say women always reveal their true colors from the very beginning of a relationship.
The always showing red flags theory, right?
Yeah.
It's a popular one.
Yeah. And their advice is basically that, it's up to men to spot these supposed red flags and then, I guess, run for the hills. I don't know.
It's certainly a very direct approach.
Yeah.
But, to say that someone's true nature is immediately evident,
right?
I think that raises some interesting questions, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
People are complex. We evolve, we adapt, we, sometimes even surprise ourselves.
Yeah.
To assume that there's no room for growth or change or even self-deception seems a bit, simplistic, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, it really makes you think twice about those, rose-colored glasses we wear at the beginning, are we really seeing those red flags?
Yeah, or wait, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of things we might miss, this source goes on to suggest that women can actually, sense low self-esteem in men and will actually exploit it, leading to more, you guessed it, disrespect.
Of course.
They even give some pretty specific examples.
Oh boy.
Like showering a woman with compliments about her looks, not setting clear boundaries, or even rewarding bad behavior with attention or affection, that kind of thing.
See, now that one stings a little bit. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah.
Are we really sending out these low self-esteem vibes? Is that a thing?
Well, it's definitely more complicated than this source makes it seem.
Right.
It's not about, women intentionally targeting men with low self-esteem, but I do think there's something to be said about how our own confidence or, lack thereof influences the way we interact with others.
Okay.
So think about it this way. When you project self-assurance, you kind of naturally communicate your own value,
right,
and what you're willing to accept from other people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not about, being arrogant or overbearing or anything, but just having a healthy sense of self-worth.
Yeah, I like that. So it's less about attracting a certain type of person and more about the patterns that we kind of reinforce in our relationships.
100%. Let's say, for example, you're constantly seeking validation from your partner, or, always apologizing for having needs and opinions, right?
Yeah.
That kind of behavior, it creates an environment where disrespect is more likely to kind of flourish. You know?
Yeah.
It's like you're almost subconsciously giving someone permission to treat you poorly.
Wow. Yeah.
And this dynamic, it doesn't just apply to romantic relationships either.
Right.
This can show up in friendships, with family, at work. It really can impact all sorts of relationships.
That's a really good point about self-awareness, for sure. Speaking of patterns, though, this source, they then connect disrespectful behavior from women back to, wait for it, the men's mothers.
You're kidding. They went there.
They went there. Yeah, their whole argument is that men who struggle with setting boundaries, it's because they likely experienced what they call inconsistent love from their mothers growing up.
Okay.
So the idea is that this then leads them to, seek validation and accept poor treatment from, romantic partners later in life. Honestly, I gotta say, that whole connecting it back to your mom thing, that has me kind of intrigued.
Yeah.
Because it's not exactly a new idea, right? That the relationships we have as kids, they shape the relationships we have as adults. But are they really saying that a difficult relationship with your mom means you're basically doomed to attract disrespectful partners? That's it?
Well, I think thankfully human beings are a little more complicated than that.
I would hope so.
It's true that, like, if you look at, for example, research on attachment theory,
Okay, yeah.
which, that whole area looks at how our early bonds, especially with our caregivers, kind of shape how we relate to others.
Yeah.
There's definitely, some evidence to suggest that, those early experiences can have an influence, but it's not like a life sentence or anything like that.
Okay, good.
Right. We can learn to identify those patterns, challenge them, and actually develop healthier ways of, relating to people.
So it's more about understanding than like placing blame.
Exactly.
And then maybe using that understanding to make different choices now.
100%. It's about recognizing, okay, maybe I do have this tendency to always put other people's needs before my own, or maybe I don't know, maybe I dismiss red flags too quickly because I'm terrified of being alone.
Right.
And then that's about asking yourself, where did that come from? And is this pattern actually serving me?
Okay, so then how do we actually break those patterns? Because this advice segment we're talking about, their big solution is all about boundaries, which, boundaries, they're important. They basically say men need to have these really firm boundaries and then be ready to walk away if those boundaries are disrespected, instead of trying to, keep the peace, as they put it. But what does a healthy boundary, what does that even look like in real life?
Right. That's the real question, isn't it? Because I think oftentimes a boundary gets misconstrued as an ultimatum.
Oh, interesting.
Right. It's not about trying to control how someone else behaves. It's really about, self-respect. It's about being really clear about what you are and are not willing to accept, and then communicating that, directly, but of course, respectfully.
Okay, so then what if someone just, they keep crossing those boundaries even after you've said something?
Well, that's where that walking away piece might come in.
Okay.
But again, I think it's important to frame it in a way where it's not about, it's not about trying to manipulate someone or play games.
Yeah.
It's about just recognizing that ultimately you can't force someone to treat you with respect,
What?
And sometimes, honestly, the kindest thing you can do for yourself, the healthiest choice, is to, create some distance, step back from that relationship, or, maybe even walk away from it entirely.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. I don't know about you. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But even if we're not, buying into everything this source material is saying, it gets the wheels turning,
Yeah, 100%. And I think, honestly, the best thing we can take away from any advice, whether we agree with it or not, is that, it's an invitation, really, to reflect, to kind of look at our own patterns, our own choices, and think, what's really going on here, and what do I want to do differently going forward? That's how we actually create real, lasting change, not just in our relationships, but in ourselves too, right?
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, listeners, remember, as you're out there navigating your own relationships, self-awareness is it's everything. And if something feels off, trust your gut. It's never too late to set those boundaries and create those healthier, more fulfilling connections that you deserve.